Welcome friends to another r/malicious compliance video. As always, if you enjoy these videos, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. And our first story of the day is by Ben K4, how my dad got a supermarket shut down for a day. My dad owns a small vending machine company, and for years one of his accounts was the local grocery store. He had a couple machines in the back of the employees' areas that were there for years. It was a weird little break room. It was on the second floor up a narrow staircase in the stockroom. To get the machines in originally, they'd use the forklift and put them through a cargo door on the second floor. Years later, the store had been bought by a generic regional grocery chain, and they decided to redo the whole back area. The new manager asked my dad to remove his machines as they were going to tear down the break room. We went down on the weekend to remove them and asked if they could lower them from the cargo door for us. The manager flipped out and flatly refused, telling us it wasn't her problem and to take them down the stairs. We measured everything and figured out that they were simply too wide to go down the narrow staircase and tried to explain the problem to the manager. Her reply was, "Cut the darn things in half or I'll get the sawzall and do it myself." This was her critical mistake. The machines were very old and destined for the junkyard anyway, and she had just gracefully offered to cut the machines in half for us. We went upstairs and took the stock, plus the valuable electronic parts from the machine, and left the useless shells there for her to sawzall at her pleasure. At the time, I had a friend who worked at the store who I had explained the situation to. She told me that the manager was awful and roundly disliked and some not-so-nice names that they referred to her by. A few days later, she called me up laughing. Apparently, they had planned to do the demolition overnight and open in the morning, but on the night of the demolition, there had been a major problem. 2 vending machines were still up in the break room, and they'd deemed it unsafe to destroy the structure with them up there. Also, they'd removed the forklifts due to the construction, so there was no way to get them down. Eventually, they had to attempt to cut the machines in half, but they're pretty tough, so it took way longer than expected. The end result was they ran far over time, and they had to keep the store closed a day to finish the teardown. The manager was still in charge there for a couple years, and used to glare at me anytime I was in shopping. If you knew you pulled one over on somebody like this, and you knew that they were still working at the place, and you kind of ran into them, whether on purpose or not, would you kind of make a little eye contact with them, maybe bring some things up to the register and act all purposefully a little off just to kind of rub it in their face a little bit? Let me know in the comments down below. This next story is by 12-inch Juicy Burrito. Treat emergency drills as an actual emergency while the company's violating OSHA equals busted door. This is a short story about my dad that I think you guys will like. In the 90s, my dad did CNC for a company that made items for the US military and NASA. In the building he worked in, a lot of his coworkers would use the emergency exit for a fast route to the parking lot. It got so bad that management chained the door so it couldn't be opened. The room was the storage area and had a forklift for moving pallets around. Everyone was told to take the drill seriously because a few years earlier, there was a cyanide spill and one of the employees ignored the alarm. Well, one day there was a fire drill, his coworkers went to that door and saw it was locked, so they went to the other emergency exit just down the hall. My dad was about to, but went, "Screw it," got into the forklift. Outside, the managers were doing a head count when they heard a loud bang. My dad used the forklift to open the door. His manager was yelling at him about how he's going to get in a lot of trouble for doing that because it was a drill. My dad shrugged and replied, "You said to treat every drill like an actual emergency, didn't you? That was an emergency exit that was chained shut." The door was fixed, was never locked again, and my dad was asked by one of the higher-ups to not do that again. That takes a lot of confidence and guts to go ahead and just burst the door open like that, but I guess if you want to make a statement, you gotta really make a statement. This next story is by MJC Stevens. Want me to apply to another team? You got it. As always, this happened a few years ago. I'm a data analyst and have too many STEM degrees to count. I work at a big bank where the only thing that matters is years of experience. It doesn't matter if you have a PhD or a bachelor's, they both mean the same thing. I came in as an entry-level 28-year-old because I got so many degrees. I was doing so much better than an entry-level analyst that once my minimum years experience hit, I told my director that I wanted 80,000 or I'm going to apply to another team. He told me that there was no way that I was going to get 80K from any team. I asked him if he could just ask HR because I really didn't want to change teams, but I was going to get as much money as I thought I deserved. After I asked him, he said, I'm not going to ask HR because I know 100% that you're not going to get paid that much no matter what. If you want to waste time applying to other teams just to be told the same thing, then go ahead. I applied to another team in the same department the same day. This was Monday. On Wednesday, I got called by the director of that team for an interview, and I got an offer on Thursday. The offer was for $92,000. I instantly accepted it and told my current director that I got an offer and had accepted it. He got so mad at me and asked me why I would apply and accept a position without telling him. I said, "You told me to." After 2 weeks, I started my new position on my new team, and I got a call from my old VP. He asked me why I left without letting him or my old director counteroffer. I told him what happened, and he was shocked. He told me that they would have counteroffered me on the spot. It turns out my old director never thought I would leave. Joke's on him. If you have a good employee and they come to you and they tell you that they want to be compensated fairly or else they're going to be looking for work elsewhere, I feel like it's in the best interest of everybody not to challenge that. I don't know what this guy was thinking, but he called the bluff, and it was a bad bluff to call. Our next story is by Inkblot Doggo, entitled "Friend Learns to Choose Their Words Carefully." Before we begin, I'd like to say that this story may seem familiar to some others, as I found out that this kind of incident isn't as uncommon as I first thought. Whilst I personally think that this is unfortunate, it's just how life is sometimes. Backstory: I had a friend who we'll call Josh, which is obviously not his actual name. Josh and I had been friends since we were young. Turns out liking Transformers, wrestling, and Hot Wheels makes it really easy to make friends in elementary school, or primary school for those on the other side of the Atlantic. Josh originally was a pretty good guy, but his parents had issues with one another and eventually split up. His mother remarried, and his stepfather began to spoil Josh rotten. Josh began to become a lot more antagonistic, and we grew distant as the years went on, but I tried to remain friendly with him, hoping he'd eventually see the error of his ways. He went through multiple relationships, all of them ending by his hand, but I was unaware as he only spoon-fed me information and made the other party look like they were in the wrong. The incident: Josh had recently had a breakup with a girl we'll be calling Megan, who I was friendly with before the breakup. Whilst I was worried about Megan due to us being friends, I stupidly decided to check on Josh first. Now, I had let Josh borrow stuff from me, including multiple gaming consoles, clothes, and even a few bits of furniture. I tried to be a good friend, but I didn't know that I was being taken advantage of. We had decided to order some pizza, and Josh had unwittingly ordered from Local Pizza, where Megan worked. Local Pizza doesn't deliver. Josh persuaded me to go and get the pizza. In reality, he basically demanded it because he was too lazy to drive that way. I decided to bite the bullet and just drive my way to Local Pizza and walked inside. Lo and behold, I met with Megan, who was on break at the moment. Megan and I spoke about things, and the topic of Josh came up. It was busy and our order wasn't even done yet, so I didn't mind stopping to chat, until Megan began to tell me her side of things. It turned out that Josh had been a major jerk to Megan until Megan's brother Drake stepped in and pulled his sister out of the relationship. Drake had been a friend as well, but Josh had fed me lies, so I stopped speaking to Drake. I didn't want to believe Megan at first, until she called Drake, who corroborated her story. It was a lot to swallow. Josh's breakups had begun to make a lot more sense now, and I felt sick. Was I friends with a horrible person? I asked Megan some questions, and she told me her side of the story, and ended up calling out a lot of Josh's flat-out lies. After the pizza was done, I promised Megan that I'd talk to Josh about this as someone who'd been close to him for years. She thought that maybe I'd be able to get through to him. Oh, were we both wrong. I got back to Josh's, and we just spoke about things until I managed to get on the topic of Megan. I mentioned to him that we spoke and what she said. Big mistake. He got angry and called Megan a fat lying witch and declared that I shouldn't believe her. I told him that Jake corroborated her story and that I was going through a lot of stress trying to make heads or tails of all this. Josh, now absolutely livid at me, screams, "Shut the freak up, get the freak out, you want to believe that witch, take your stuff and go." I was shocked. I tried to say something, but Josh cut me off. I said, "Get the freak out, take your stuff and get the freak out of my house. You want to freaking believe her and her stupid brother of hers? Fine, tell everyone how much of a horrible freaking person I am. Let's see who believes you." Malicious compliance is Yep, you read that right, my dear reader. Compliances, plural. Now, whilst I'm not a big fan of confrontation, I also despise being yelled at. He wants me to take my stuff and go, so be it. I just give him, okay Josh, I'll take my things and go. So I begin to take it all back. Gaming consoles, clothes, and I even grabbed the stand-up mirror I'd let him borrow ages ago. He tried to stop me multiple times, but I simply pushed past him and reiterated his words. He wanted me to shut up, grab my things, and go, so I did. PS2 I let him borrow, taking that back. GameCube he borrowed so he could play some games he got at a thrift store, that's mine, taking that home. I took everything that was mine, packed it into my car, and ignored him as he screamed, ranted, and raved at me, threatening to call the police. I simply dared him to, as I was only taking back my things. When I left, I called Megan and Drake and told them what happened. They said they had my back in case things went awry after this. Then I let them in on the second thing he said, tell everyone how much of a horrible person he is. Okay, Josh, bet. Megan, Drake, and I went through our contacts for anyone who knew Josh and told them what happened. One of these people was Josh's own mother, who was absolutely livid at him, as Josh was living in his home on his mother and stepfather's dime. The fallout, Josh's reputation pretty much collapsed out from under him as evidence came to light, and Josh's various exes, emboldened by Megan and Drake coming out with their stories, began to spread their own stories on what had happened. Josh's friend circle turned on him rather quickly, finding out how much of a jerk he actually was. What made all of this worse for Josh was all of these stories had evidence, such as texts, camera footage, and audio recordings, all of this evidence making it obvious that those Josh hurt weren't lying. Josh's mother and stepfather ended up pulling his sizable allowance due to this, and he couldn't afford his home, and was forced to move back in with them. Josh and I still don't talk anymore, and he had to sell off a lot of his furniture and personal possessions to pay off the debt he'd managed to rack up after his allowance was pulled. I've heard that Josh has changed and is getting better, but after the crap he put me through, I'd rather be keeping my distance. It's good that in the end you hear that Josh probably is changing for the better, but after somebody's been leading you along like that for so long, I feel like there's really only so much you can actually put up with. Which is why I definitely understand why OP wouldn't want to be in contact with them anymore. And our final story of the day is by Accomplished Wardrobe. Nothing beats scummy landlords during COVID shutdown. I hated my old apartment, needed to desperately get out, and right when I was looking for rentals last year, coronavirus hit and everyone shut down. With less than a week on my lease, I had to jump at the first available home. Didn't even get to inspect it. I ended up with equally horrible property managers. I didn't have a key on day one, had to break in to move in. They didn't tell me about the German roach infestation. It's okay, I used to do pest control, so I managed, and so forth. Right when I lost power during Christmas, also okay, I live in the South, I didn't get too cold, I tracked down the original property owner and just asked her if I could get out of the contract and just pay her directly. We investigated many options, and the best way to get out of the contract was to just pay for the last remaining months and write a 30-day notice. They call me and tell me that I have to write them a notice, signed and sent and received on the exact date 30 days from the lease's end to be accepted, or I will lose my $1,000 security deposit. They really stressed it had to be mailed and definitely on time, or they won't be able to accept it. Cue my pettiness. I wrote a template letter with a generic, this is a number of days till lease end day notice. I'm writing to terminate my contract and to receive my security deposit as stated. I sent one out on my 103-day notice, then another one on 89-day notice, then another one on 73-day notice, and so forth. Basically, whenever I remembered about it, I would change the date around, print it, sign it, and mail it. They call me saying this is very unnecessary and they got the message loud and clear, but they sounded pretty rude about it, so I sent some more. I then received some passive-aggressive emails that they'll honor the contract and leave me the $1,000 deposit as I have sent them a 30-day notice. But they can be tricky, and as I haven't technically sent them an exact 30 days notice, I have some more letters to send. Plus again, they sounded pretty rude over email. Cue the final 15-day countdown till my 30-day notice letter. I upped the ante. I now have one letter per day to send, and I've changed the fonts on each letter ranging from Papyrus to Jokerman to Comic Sans. My favorite one is the one where it's all bright yellow and barely legible. It just hurts looking at it. Oh, and better yet, I got the last batch sent as certified mail, so I get an email that they received it and that they had to sign it. On my 34th day notice letter, now probably the 20th letter I've sent, I received my cashier's check back. No message or anything. Fortunately, I have 4 more letters to send. The best $43 on stamps I've ever paid. When a man is petty, nothing knows the bounds to which they'll stop. Honestly, you just kinda have to respect the hustle at that point. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel, and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.